She was a young woman looking to strike out on her own.
She was just ready to live life.
They were the couple that opened up their door and their hearts to her.
She was trusting, she was innocent, she was protected.
They all seemed like the best of friends, until a startling discovery sparked a desperate search.
They had no body, they had nothing. They just knew, here's blood on the parking lot floor.
As the manhunt unfolded, investigators wondered, is this an innocent friendship or a twisted threesome built on infidelity, lies, and cold-blooded murder?
This rage is building up.
She was experimenting with her sexuality.
She would meet people online and talk to them and just go meet them.
The person that did this to this victim was angry. They wanted this person out of their life permanently.
Monday, November 17th, 2008, 8:30 a.m. The property manager at a Herndon, Virginia apartment complex is walking through the building's parking garage when a shocking sight stops him dead in his tracks.
He noticed a puddle of blood and blood stain all over the garage floor, which kind of alerted him to something is not right, and he calls the police.
Within minutes, officers arrive at the scene.
The blood stains, the puddle of blood, something went wrong. That was foul play there.
But aside from the blood evidence, police don't have much else to go on.
They had no body, they had nothing. They just knew, here's blood on the parking lot floor.
170 to dispatch. Start supervisor, crime lab, and on-call investigator, please.
Officers call for backup and request the assistance of their CSI team.
They start going through every tooth and nail pertaining to how this evidence got here, who it could belong to, and what happened to the person whose blood was found. Is that person still alive?
As police span out across the garage, it isn't long before they notice something else.
We have a blood stain on the garage floor that leads to this dumpster.
The trash that day was supposed to have been picked up. However, the individuals had not gotten there yet, so they were able to secure the trash from the dumpster.
Detectives may have caught a break, but finding evidence in an overflowing dumpster is no easy task.
The trash compactor has to be combed through piece by piece. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. You have no clue as to what you're looking for.
Sorting through the pile of garbage, investigators make a chilling discovery.
Inside that dumpster, a lot of personal objects was found, such as a mobile phone, key fob, and articles of clothing.
And what do you do with a cell phone? You start checking the numbers and see who it belongs to.
There's a lot of calls from this one number yesterday. I'm gonna call it back, see who it is.
And the person on the other side of this phone call will spark an investigation into a twisted web of love and deceit, all surrounding one woman. 22-year-old Erica Yancey. Born in Michigan City, Indiana in 1986, Erica Yancey was a bright and loving child, but sadly, her early life was marred by tragedy.
Erica's father was murdered.
In the eyes of her family, Erica became a very special child.
We all kind of gathered around, and as they say in the Western, we circled the wagons to protect Erica.
She was the apple of my eye. You always protected your last child, and I didn't consider her a grandchild. I considered her my child.
Growing up, Erica worked hard at her studies, graduated high school, and in 2005, she jumped at an offer to move in with her aunt in the D.C. area, and soon landed a job handling baggage at Dulles International Airport.
Erica ended up being the first woman with that company that drove one of the tugs, that bus that moves the plane into place.
As aggressive as Erica was about her job, she was even more excited to be living in a place as diverse and open-minded as Metro D.C.
She went buck wild. She got into this different alternative lifestyle. She decided that she was gay. She cut off all of her hair. She got piercings. She got tattoos.
I figured that was just a stage everybody went through. She did what she wanted to do, but she became her own person. And she was a lovely person.
Erica also bought a new car, a silver 2007 Hyundai. It was her pride and joy, a sign of her newfound freedom and mobility.
Once she got the car, you can see her just like a little bird getting her wings and just ready to do things.
Erica also started surfing the net, meeting new friends and new love interests in online chat rooms.
She would meet people online and talk to them and just go meet them.
She informed us that she had met a friend that lived in New York. And my sister Paige and I found out about it, and we told her, over our dead bodies, are you going? And of course, she went.
During the trip, Erica found a new lover and a new responsibility.
I found out that Erica, like the young lady that she met in New York, we found out that Erica was sending her money because she had kids. She wanted to help those people that had less than she did.
It wouldn't be the only young woman that Erica fell for online. While Erica was seeing the young woman in New York, she met Ellen Parker.
Erica and Ellen met on an online site, and in the course of chatting online, they discovered that they worked very near to each other.
But unlike her previous online connection, Erica and Ellen's relationship wasn't physical. Ellen was heterosexual and was living with her boyfriend, Marcus Williams, with whom she had a lovely child.
Ellen Phillips and Marcus Williams were an item. They had an apartment together.
Pregnant with their second child, Ellen and Marcus had their share of problems, from a lack of quality childcare to occasional cash flow issues. But ever the giving soul, Erica was glad to help out any way possible, which allowed her to do a good deed while strengthening her relationship with Ellen.
I can remember telling her, you know, Erica, that's not something that you really want to get involved in. But because she was such a caring person, she got involved.
In fact, Ellen and Erica grew so close that when Ellen gave birth, Erica was right by her side at the hospital.
She called it her baby. So, Mom, I'm gonna send you a picture of my baby when you get a baby. Then she said, no, it's my friend's baby.
In September 2008, Ellen, Marcus, and their 2 children moved into a cozy 3-bedroom apartment near the airport. Soon after that, they invited Erica to come live with them. And though her biological family had no idea what to make of Erica's living arrangement or her continued relationship with her lover in New York, the 22-year-old felt she was living the life of her dreams.
She was off on her own for the first time and don't know whether to go blind or bark at the moon.
But Erica Yancey's dream takes a deeply disturbing turn on November 17, 2008. It starts when investigators are called to an apartment complex in suburban D.C., the same apartment complex where Erica, Ellen, and Marcus recently moved in. They've been asked to investigate a bloody trail that leads from the parking garage to a nearby dumpster. Searching the dumpster, they find several personal items, including a cell phone. As CSIs continue their search, detectives review the phone's incoming call log. It seems someone had repeatedly called this phone the day before. Dialing the number, they connect with Jacqueline Goodall.
Hi, this is Detective John with the police department. We found this phone near a crime scene and was trying to determine whose phone it was.
A crime scene?
My number came up on her phone.
Jacqueline's surprised to hear an unfamiliar voice calling from this phone. It's registered to her favorite niece, 22-year-old Erica Yancey, who lives in the apartment complex where the phone was found.
We didn't know where Erica was. We couldn't reach her. And I received a call. They found the cell phone. They found clothes that were bloody. And that's when he began to explain to me that they saw a lot of blood.
A lot of blood? What do you mean a lot of blood?
Ma'am, there's actually quite a bit.
Is it so much blood that she might not be alive?
It's a terrifying proposition, one that opens a floodgate of other possibilities. Is there a connection between the trail of blood and the personal items detectives found in the trash? Has Erica been the victim of a violent attack? If so, Where is she now? While Erica's family holds out hope, detectives race to answer these questions. But little do they know, the case is about to take a dark and deeply sinister turn. "22-year-old Erica Yancey discovered newfound freedom when she moved into an apartment in Herndon, Virginia, with her online acquaintance turned best friend, Ellen Parker, and Ellen's boyfriend, Marcus Williams.
They connected with each other and realized that they had a lot in common. They basically worked in the same area, and the friendship struck up from there.
It seemed like a friendship destined to last forever. But on November 17, 2008, Erica suddenly disappeared. And all that's left behind is a trail of blood in her parking garage, leading to a dumpster filled with her personal belongings.
They find the blood, they want to search the trash to see if something's in there.
They went in piece by piece, bag by bag, and collected whatever evidence. But then, of course, you got to separate the garbage from the evidence. And that is very hard to do.
It's a process that also takes time, something investigators and Erica's family know is in very short supply.
We didn't know where Erica was or how she was. I thought she was somewhere laying in a ditch someplace.
Detectives are eager to interview Erica's roommates, Marcus Williams and his girlfriend, Ellen Parker.
We'd like to ask you a couple of questions.
What is this about?
Well, we believe someone abducted and attacked Erica Yancey.
Okay, all right, come in.
According to best friend Ellen, the last time she saw her roommate was the day before.
The morning of November 16, Erica and Ellen get up, and Erica drives Ellen to work at her place of business near Dulles Airport. They had one car that they were sharing. It was Erica's car. And so Ellen expected that Erica would go back home, maybe go back to sleep.
Well, basically, I made her lunch for her, and she gave me a ride to work, and she told me that she would give me a call later on, and I just didn't hear anything from her the whole day.
She never received a telephone call at work that day, which she thought was a little unusual. It wasn't anything major. But Ellen continued by saying that throughout the entire day, she never heard anything from Erica.
Ellen says that following her shift, she had a coworker drive her home. Erica's car wasn't in the parking garage, which seemed a bit out of the ordinary. And when Ellen set foot inside the apartment, something else caught her eye.
The first thing she recognized is that the lunch that she had made for Erica had not been eaten or touched. So she began wondering, well, what could have happened to Erica?
Ellen figured, well, Erica must be off visiting her family, and I'll talk to her at some point.
Detectives also question Ellen's boyfriend, Marcus Williams, who confirms that after Erica drove Ellen to work, she never returned to their apartment.
So you didn't see her the rest of the day?
I've been here watching the kids all day. I haven't seen her since this morning.
After a search of the residence, police find no sign of Erica, nor do they find signs of foul play. It appears the couple's version of events is accurate. So what happened to Erica, and where is she now?
Maybe somebody had robbed her, or somebody had took her car, that she had fought him, that she had gotten hurt.
I thought she was carjacked, yeah. I thought somebody was trying to rob her.
That's not the only theory being floated.
So she just started experimenting with her life.
Maybe she met someone online, and that situation ended up being a terrible situation.
As the investigation shifts into high gear, Erica's mother flies to Virginia from her home in Indiana.
They were still looking for her. They had the newscast everywhere. I was on the news telling them just to let her come home.
But just days after the televised plea, officers make a huge discovery.
An officer observed a car fit in the description of the missing car.
The car is parked in the handicap zone of an industrial parking lot. The officer runs the tags and confirms it's Erica's car.
Investigators looked inside the car and noticed there was a body partially covered in the back seat.
Erica is lying in the back seat on the floor.
For Erica's family, it's a gut-wrenching turn of events.
Calling my mom was the hardest thing that I've ever done because Erica was her baby.
I was angry, like anybody. I wanted to really get to the person.
As Erica's family grapples with this tragedy, police know a stone-cold killer remains at large. And soon clues from the crime scene will fuel new speculation as to what may have happened to the young woman almost everyone adored. On November 19, 2008, the frantic search for missing 22-year-old Erica Yancey came to a grim end when police found her body in the back of her car.
She had been stabbed several other places on the body, but the main wound was a serious throat slit.
You can't do that to somebody. You don't do that to somebody. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for violence like that.
Erica's car is parked at a business a half a mile away from her apartment complex. As investigators examine the gory scene, it's obvious Erica had put up the fight of her life.
Multiple stab wounds to her body, a lot of stab wounds on the backside of her hands.
Anytime you might see wounds to the hand, elbows, and arms, those are defensive wounds. You know, if someone's getting stabbed, they're putting their arms up and stuff, trying to stop the blows from coming.
Searching the crime scene, CSIs locate what appears to be the murder weapon, buried in a potted plant beside the car.
The apparent murder weapon, the box cutter, was found with Erica's blood on it.
After tagging the evidence, the next question for investigators is what may have sparked this violent encounter. Judging by the nature of Erica's wounds, the robbery angle seems like an unlikely motive.
On a street robbery, you won't have a victim receiving so many stab wounds. The assailant wants to just go in, do what they gotta do, and leave. Erica had a significant wound underneath her neck from the left side to the right side. The type of person that would cause that type of injury to another person is a person who's passionate.
The possibility that Erica may have known her assailant is a chilling thought. But just how had her body wound up here?
They sliced her neck, put her body in the car, and then they drove her body off about a half mile away from where she lived.
Detectives decide it's time to take a closer look at Erica's personal relationships. Could her killer be one of the many women she'd allegedly wooed on the internet?
When you meet people in cyberspace, you only meet what they want you to meet.
Erica's hardest thing was trusting. She trusted everybody and believed everybody.
Speaking to Erica's family again, one love interest rises to the top of the suspect list.
She was seeing somebody in New York and she's doing this, and she's just going out being all kind of just gallivanting around, just having a good old time.
What can you tell us about this woman?
Well, I don't know that much about her, but really seemed to like her a lot.
I think she was mixed up about her relationships.
To police, it seems they may have finally found a motive that fits the crime. Could Erica's lover in New York be jealous about her other girlfriends or her unique relationship with Ellen and Marcus? If that's the case, could that jealousy have boiled over into rage?
My initial thoughts is, you know what? That New York girl, she done did something crazy.
Police identify Erica's lover and race to New York. Detectives can't help but wonder if this is the big break they're looking for. But to their surprise, when police confront Erica's girlfriend about her death, she seems genuinely shocked. Pressing her further, she denies any involvement in Erica's death and claims to have never left New York.
Well, I've been here.
You've been here?
Yes, I've been here in New York.
The whole time?
Yes.
While police attempt to verify her alibi, she makes a startling confession.
How well did you know her?
I loved Erica, but me and Erica weren't exclusive. we decided to see other people, and she hasn't been here in a while.
To police, it's not the news they're expecting to hear and seems to undermine any motive on her part. A fact that's ultimately confirmed when her alibi checks out. With their investigation stymied, police decide to circle back around to the crime scene they'd encountered days earlier. Having already scoured the parking garage where Erica's body was found, detectives turn to the help of canine officers.
A bloodhound was brought in by the police department, and these dogs are specifically trained to follow scents.
Using scents from items found inside her car, the dog takes off. But to their surprise, it doesn't lead its handler away from the scene, but straight back to Erica's apartment building.
The Fairfax County dog was able to follow the trail of blood from the parking spot through the parking lot to the door to the apartment complex, but loses the scent.
But why would Erica's killer return to the original crime scene?
Only residents typically can get in and out of the building, and that leads police to believe this person is likely a resident of this building.
Could someone in Erica's own complex really be behind this terrible crime? As police dig deeper, they discover a shocking new clue, along with a lover who's harboring a very deep secret. "22-year-old Erica Yancey believed she had the world at her fingertips. A baggage handler for Delta Airlines, she had a great job, a second family, and a lover in New York.
She was just ready to live life.
But that life came to a terrible end when police found Erica savagely stabbed to death in the back seat of her new car.
The person that did this to this victim was angry, was more like in a jealous rage. They wanted this person out of their life permanently.
At first, investigators suspect Erica's girlfriend in New York might have murdered her out of jealousy. But the woman has an airtight alibi. With the assailant still at large, investigators turn their attention back to Erica's vehicle, where a bloodhound provides them with one very curious clue.
The dog starts at where Erica's body is found with the car and traces the trail back to the apartment complex.
This seems like someone who's very familiar with this building is involved in this.
But who? With more than 200 units in the sprawling apartment complex, detectives know they have their work cut out for them. But before they start knocking on too many doors, detectives receive a call from their CSI team. They found something in the dumpster besides Erica's belongings.
There was clothing that they found that had blood on it.
It was a worn tank top, some commonly referred to as time as a wife beater. There was blue jeans, gloves, and 2 ski masks.
The gloves in the trash had Erica's blood on them, and that also had unknown DNA.
Finding 2 sets of gloves and masks means 2 people could be involved in this brutal attack. This revelation prompts detectives to pay another visit to the pair of apartment residents closest to Erica, her roommates, Ellen Parker and Marcus Williams.
These are passionate wounds. So you start looking to her. Well, she has Ellen, who's her friend. She also has Marcus, who's her friend.
Police ask the couple to come down to the station for a formal interview. Once there, detectives begin by questioning Ellen Parker.
So neither you nor Marcus had anything to do with this murder?
No.
You're hiding something.
That's when Ellen finally confesses, not to murder, but to a passionate love affair with Erica.
Initially, they were just online friends, but then that relationship blossomed into something more.
Ellen admits the relationship was unexpected, but their deep attraction for one another was undeniable.
I thought Erica loved Ellen. And from my perception, I thought Ellen loved Erica. It looked like it was blooming love.
In fact, she says the situation had grown so steamy that Erica, not Marcus, was sleeping in the master bedroom with her.
Suddenly, Erica and Ellen are sharing the main bedroom, and Marcus is in the other bedroom.
According to Ellen, It wasn't her first affair with another woman.
Marcus and I had an agreement. He's let me do this before. I've been with women before. He hasn't ever had a problem with it, and he's fine with us having like an open relationship and me exploring what's out there.
But Ellen does admit that this lesbian liaison had gone farther than the rest.
And Ellen described a romantic night out that she and Erica had had, I think it was about 2 weeks earlier, maybe less. They had had an expensive night out at a hotel.
But when Erica and Ellen returned home from their steamy night out, they discovered someone had vandalized Erica's beloved new car.
Someone keyed her vehicle and caused her to become very upset. Was someone so hurt by the fact that now Erica and Ellen are going away on a romantic getaway so that they're gonna scratch this car?
According to Ellen, after Erica's car was keyed, the living arrangement with Marcus continued to deteriorate. And in October of 2008, Ellen decided it was time to put an end to the relationship.
Ellen told Marcus, "We're through. We're breaking up. I'm moving out. I'm taking the kids." Ellen and Erica were going to be moving in together.
Could the threat of losing his girlfriend and children to another woman have pushed Marcus over the edge?
No. Marcus loved Erica like his sister. There's no way that he could have done that.
Did Ellen know more than she was letting on? And could jealousy have eaten into her heart? During her interrogation, Ellen had admitted she was aware of Erica's other lover.
Ellen had said that she had heard a voicemail on Erica's phone about another woman.
Was there an argument just before she left? Was there some kind of a dispute between them? They had to consider Ellen a person of interest.
But Ellen remains adamant neither she nor Marcus had anything to do with Erica's death. While police check out Ellen's alibi that she was at work, they turn up the heat on Marcus Williams.
How did you feel about your girlfriend running off with another woman?
Well, it didn't really make me happy.
But Marcus asserts he's no killer. He claims that when Erica went missing, he was at home watching his kids.
Sir, it's like I told you guys earlier. There's no possible way I could have been anywhere else. I swear, man, I'm innocent.
While police certainly have their suspicions, they have no hard evidence on which to hold either Marcus or Ellen. Still, they swab them both for DNA in case they are able to link them to the crime scene. And after confirming Ellen's alibi, police released them that afternoon.
Ellen was at work, and that was quickly substantiated by the police. She was at work that morning.
The police are definitely keeping an eye on Marcus, and they had, at this point, interviewed him extensively. They've taken his DNA, and they know where he is.
While Marcus maintains his innocence, Erica's family prepares to lay her to rest.
After Erica's body was found, they did hold a memorial service for her, and 100 people showed up to pay tribute to her.
Among the throng of mourners are Ellen Parker and Marcus Williams. Marcus remains low-key and respectful, but after viewing Erica's body, Ellen loses it.
Ellen was, oh my God, I'm so scared. I don't know who had did this. And, you know, maybe they're after me and I got to get away, and she was crying.
Shortly after the funeral, although Ellen and Erica had been an item, Marcus and Ellen reconnect and move to Michigan with Ellen's mother.
Without any evidence tying Marcus to the crime, police are powerless to stop the couple from moving. They vow to Erica's family they won't stop until the crime is solved. But months pass with no new developments. Then on September 21st, 2009, there's a shocking break in the case.
Michael Thomas is arrested and charged with murder.
The announcement leaves Erica's friends and family stunned.
I was like, who is Michael Thomas, and what does Michael Thomas have to do with any of this?
Who is this mystery man? And what role had he allegedly played in this crime? That answer is about to come to light, and the truth is far more twisted than anyone could ever believe. September 1st, 2009. 10 months after Erica Yancey was slashed to death with a box cutter, police make a surprise arrest in the case. 27-year-old Maryland resident Michael Thomas.
There was a significant amount of evidence that was found in the dumpster in the apartment building in the garage. The DNA found inside the gloves belonged to Michael.
It's enough evidence to charge Michael with the crime, but detectives are still curious about his connection to the victim. Unfortunately, Erica's family is at a loss.
I knew nothing about Michael Thomas. We didn't know anything about Michael Thomas.
And as police dig deeper into his background, an unlikely picture of the alleged perpetrator begins to emerge.
Michael Thomas was kind of a geeky, nerdy, church-going, all the good things that people want to say about their child. So he went to school, got an education, came back, got a job, taught for a year as a teacher.
Very even-tempered, mild-mannered. I've never seen him angry, never seen him out of control.
While Michael doesn't exactly fit the profile of a killer, the background check turns up something else. According to his friends and family, Michael doesn't live in Erica's apartment complex, but he knows someone that did. Marcus Williams.
Michael Thomas was Marcus's friend. He didn't live in this area, but he came to town and was visiting, and they spent Saturday night together watching a UFC pay-per-view fight at their apartment.
Investigators also learned that the night before Erica's attack, Marcus invited Michael Thomas to spend the night at his apartment.
Michael Thomas was there, and he slept on the couch that night, or appeared to be asleep on the couch, when Ellen and Erica left for work that morning.
To detectives, the timing seems more than coincidental and suggests not only that Michael Thomas was involved in Erica's murder, but Marcus Williams might have been too. That theory is supported when the results of DNA tests on Erica's clothes come back from the lab.
When the DNA tests came back, it showed that Marcus's DNA was on a number of these bloody clothing items that had Erica's blood on them.
24 hours later, police arrest Marcus in Michigan and extradite him back to Virginia for the murder of his former roommate, Erica Yancey.
I was shocked that it was who it was.
I kept saying, why did they do it? Why did they kill her like that? Why?
With neither suspect talking and their trials scheduled for separate dates, those answers don't become clear until April 30th, 2010. That day, Marcus Williams is led into a Fairfax County courtroom to stand trial for first-degree murder.
When I went to the trial and I saw Marcus standing right by me, he looked like any other normal, dressed well person. You know, you wouldn't picture him as someone who would kill somebody.
But prosecutors believe they've got the right man. In their opening arguments, they assert Marcus had grown increasingly bitter about his girlfriend Ellen Parker's sexual relationship with Erica Yancey.
Ellen and Erica move into the same bedroom, and Marcus moves into another bedroom. And Ellen and Erica become the couple of the house.
Your significant other, the mother of your children, come in and another woman come put you out of your room, out of your bed. That's a slap in the face for most men.
Prosecutors say the last straw came in October 2008, when Ellen told Marcus she was leaving him for Erica once and for all. They assert that on November 16th, Marcus enlisted the help of his friend, Michael Thomas. After Erica dropped Ellen off at work, Marcus and Michael donned masks and gloves and set out to remove Erica from Marcus's life for good.
It was jealousy. He felt that she was taking his family from him.
Leaving his and Ellen's children alone in the apartment, Marcus and Michael ambushed Erica not far from her car. As Erica struggled to break free from her attackers, one of them pulled out a box cutter and slashed her throat.
They killed her, put her body in the car, threw all of the evidence in the local dumpster. And then they drove her body off about a half mile away from where she lived.
With all the evidence hidden away, the two then walked back to Marcus's apartment.
Marcus wanted Erica out of there because he had been, kicked to the curb by Ellen. So the motive presumably was to get Erica out of the picture and so that Marcus could reunite this family.
To bolster that theory, prosecutors highlight the slew of physical evidence that points to Marcus's guilt. The state's DNA findings, the scent trail leading back to the apartment, and last but not least, a surprise piece of evidence some intrepid CSIs found in the parking garage not far from the pool of blood.
But they found a lot of bleach. And to investigators, when you find bleach on a crime scene like that, you know someone there has been trying to clean up or get rid of evidence.
It had to be somebody in the building because of the bleach.
One would have to reasonably conclude Marcus had to have been the person who committed this horrible act.
But Marcus's defense team argues otherwise, highlighting the lack of eyewitnesses or any surveillance footage tying him to Erica's murder. To bolster that assertion, they call Erica's former lover, Ellen Parker, to the stand.
Ellen said, I don't think Marcus could have done this. Marcus isn't like that. Erica and Marcus got along very well, and pointed out that after the homicide, Ellen and Marcus got back together and lived together with their children again.
For Erica's friends and family listening in the courtroom, the testimony, along with Ellen's decision to stand by Marcus, strikes as the ultimate betrayal.
I think Ellen used Erica. I think that Erica to Ellen was just a meal ticket that she could manipulate. She was young and dumb, and this was somebody that she could just use.
While Ellen's testimony seems to undermine the state's case, defense attorneys still have one major hurdle to overcome: Marcus's DNA found on the bloody clothing. But his attorneys believe they can explain away that evidence.
Erica sometimes wore men's clothes, and she sometimes wore Marcus's clothes, which is why the defense said Marcus's DNA would be on clothing worn by Erica, including the bloody clothing.
The defense has made a powerful argument, but after 6 days of grueling testimony, is it enough to sway the jury? The answer to that question is about to send a jolt right through the courtroom.
For us, it was not a matter of whether or not he was guilty. It was whether or not the jury was going to find him guilty.
In a Fairfax County courtroom, prosecutors have argued that with the help of his friend, Michael Thomas, a jealous Marcus Williams killed his ex-girlfriend's lesbian lover, Erica Yancey, in an effort to get his family back together.
And in his mind at the time, that was the only way he could get away with Ellen, is to get rid of Erica.
Prosecutors claim DNA evidence found on bloody clothing implicates both Marcus and Michael in the twisted crime. It's a contention Marcus's defense team has fought hard to dispute throughout the trial.
The defense lawyers for Marcus pointed out that they all lived together, so they're just by being in the same house and doing the laundry, the DNA could have mixed.
It's certainly a plausible theory, but will the jury buy it? On May 5th, 2010, after hours of deliberation, they return with Marcus's verdict: guilty.
The range for murder one is 20 years to life in Virginia, and they gave him the minimum, 20 years.
Felt great when they said 20 years. Wish it would have been more.
Less than 2 weeks later, on May 17th, 2010, alleged co-conspirator Michael Thomas's murder trial gets underway. Michael's friends and family still can't believe the charges levied against this seemingly straight-laced, even-tempered young man.
Just seems so out of character. This was just the last thing on earth that you would ever have thought about Michael Thomas.
But once the trial's underway, there's no refuting the physical evidence squarely placing Michael at the scene.
Why would his DNA be on the inside of a glove that has blood on it? Unless he had those gloves on at one time.
The jury agrees, and on June 1st, they hand down a similar verdict and sentence to the one imposed on Marcus Williams: 20 years in prison.
They really should have stayed in jail for the rest of their life. Erica can come home. and neither should they.
But in a case where so much pain still lingers, many wonder if this heartache could have been avoided if Marcus hadn't let his jealousy get the best of him.
To even be able to handle this, you just have to take all of these little memories and all of these things that happened during the trial and how horrible it was, and put it in a box and put it away.
I wrote the letter to Marcus, and I told him I forgave him. He let Satan use him, and I feel bad that he did. I sent a picture of Erica in the letter. I said, you can look at her every day and know what you did to her for no reason.
Missing Len, a missing earring. She left us a map, Kelly murmured. We just have to find where the other pieces fell. Chapter 4. The Ghosts of Romance. To solve a murder, you must first understand the love that preceded it. Kelly began by looking into the men in Trudy's life. First, there was Ray Brown, a gentleman caller, as the older folks said. They had gone on a few dates. Ray was a man of simple pleasures, and by all accounts, he was smitten with Trudy's warmth. When Ray sat across from Kelly in the interview room, his grief was palpable. He spoke of Trudy with a reverence that didn't feel like a mask. I liked her, Sergeant Ray said, his voice cracking. She saw me as a friend, maybe, but I would have waited forever for her. His alibi was ironclad a bowling tournament with, ironically, several of Kelly's own officers. Ray was a dead end, a man left with a bouquet of what-ifs. Then, the whispers started about a peeping Tom. A neighbor claimed Trudy had been frightened by a man watching her windows. Kelly's heart raced. A predator in the shadows. But the trail led to Eddie, a local petty criminal, who was already behind bars during the time of the murder. Then came Harold Jameson. Harold and Trudy had a long, complicated historian on-again, off-again romance that spanned years. It was a kind of love that never quite heals and never quite dies. I saw a car that night, Harold admitted, his eyes red-rimmed. I was at the laundromat. I saw the engine running. I waited for her, but she never came out. You waited? Kelly asked, his suspicion flaring. And you didn't think it was odd? A running car, a barking dog, and no Trudy. I thought she was talking to someone inside, Harold said, putting his head in his hands. We'd had a spat a few weeks back. I didn't want to push. I went home. Harold was a man drowning in regret, but his car was clean, and his sorrow felt too heavy to be a performance. Kelly was left with a chilling realization. The killer wasn't a jealous lover or a known predator. The killer was someone they hadn't even looked at yet. Chapter 5. The Blood and the Dust. The breakthrough came from a place of creation. A carpenter, working on renovations in an apartment above the laundromat, was sweeping up sawdust when something caught the light. He leaned down, expecting a brass screw. Instead, he found a gold earring. When Kelly arrived, his heart was hammering against his ribs. This was the third floor. This was the maintenance area. Search everything, Kelly ordered. A crime scene technician, moving with the precision of a surgeon, knelt on the floor near a pile of wood shavings. I found it. There, nestled in the dust, was a single, blue-tinted contact lens. The apartment was the site of the nightmare. Trudy hadn't been taken from the street. She had been lured. She had walked into this room with the trust she gave everyone, and she had never walked out. Who has the keys? Kelly asked the landlord. Just me, the landlord said, shaking, and the maintenance man, Brian Tuttle. Chapter 6. The Man with the Scratch. Brian Tuttle didn't look like a monster. He looked like the man who fixed your sink. He was local, from a good family, the kind of person you'd pass at the grocery store without a second thought. But when he walked into the station for questioning, Kelly saw it immediately. A scratched, deep, angry, and fresh. It ran from his eyebrow to the bridge of his nose. Nasty mark, Kelly said, his voice dropping into a low, predatory calm. Work, Tuttle replied, his eyes darting. Accident with some tools. Tuttle was a wall of nervous denials. He claimed he didn't even know Trudy. In a town this small, Kelly challenged. She lived up the road. You worked at the building where she did her laundry. You're telling me you never saw her? Never, Tuttle snapped. It was the first lie, and as Kelly knew, once a man starts lying, he's building his own cage. Kelly checked Tuttle's record. The good family man had a history of prior conviction for abduction and sexual assault. He was a predator who had been hiding in plain sight, a wolf wearing the coveralls of a handyman. But in 1998, suspicion wasn't enough. There were no fingerprints. There was no smoking gun. There were only cigarette butts Tuttle had left in the ashtray of the interview room. Kelly bagged him. One day, he whispered to the evidence locker. One day, the world will catch up to you. Chapter 7, The Blue-Green Volvo. The investigation felt like it was stalling, the grief of the town turning into a stagnant pool of resentment. People looked at Kelly with eyes that asked, why isn't he in handcuffs? Then, a woman came forward. She had been at a bus stop near Neal Falls on the morning of the 12th. She had seen a car parked on the bridge of Boxey, bluish-green sedan. Kelly tracked down Tuttle's girlfriend, Denise. He's out of control, Denise told Kelly, her voice trembling. He's back on the drink, back on the drugs. He caught me with someone else, and he went crazy. Did he take your car? Kelly asked. Yeah, she said. My Volvo. It's blue-green. The pieces were clicking together with a sickening mechanical thud. Tuttle had been rejected by his girlfriend. He was fueled by a toxic cocktail of alcohol and misogyny. He had walked out of a pizza parlor, seeing Trudy a woman who represented everything good and unattainable land. He had decided to destroy her. He had lured her to that apartment with a lie about a vacancy. He had taken her life, then used his girlfriend's car to dump her body at the place where children went to fall in love. Chapter 8. The years began to pile up like snow in a Connecticut valley. 1999 turned into 2005. 2005 turned into 2012. Trudy's daughters grew older, their faces etched with a sorrow that never quite lifted. They saw Kelly in the grocery store. They didn't have to ask. The silence was the question. Kelly never stopped. He called the lab every month. He followed the evolution of DNA technology like a scholar. He kept the cigarette butts. He kept the wood chips found in the Volvo, hoping a wood expert could prove they matched the apartment. The case was cold, but Kelly's heart was still burning. He lived with Trudy every day. He saw her in every hug. He gave his own children. He saw her in the rushing water of Neal Falls. Justice wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon through the dark. Chapter 9. The Return of the Light. In 2013, the phone rang. Sergeant Kelly, the voice on the other end, said, "It was the state lab. We ran the samples from the Volvo seat and the cigarette butts from 98. Kelly held his breath. It's a match. Semen from the car. DNA from the body. It's Brian Tuttle. The numbers are, they're astronomical. Sergeant, it's him." Kelly didn't cheer. He didn't pump his fist. He simply sat down and wept. They found Tuttle in South Carolina. The man who had once been a nimble maintenance man was now a shell morbidly obese, tethered to an oxygen tank, confined to a week. When he was brought back to Connecticut, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had been eaten from the inside out by his own darkness. In 2016, 18 years after the car was found idling at the laundromat, Brian Tuttle pleaded guilty. Epilogue. The last hug. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. Life in prison. Trudy's daughters sat in the front row. They didn't look at They looked at a photo of their mother, the one where she was smiling, her eyes bright with the blue lenses that had eventually led them to her killer. Kelly stood at the back of the room. He felt a phantom warmth on his shoulders, the sensation of a hug from a woman who had been gone for nearly 2 decades. The sleepy bedroom community of East Hampton was different now. It was older, wiser, and scarred. But as the sun set over Neal Falls that evening, the water didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like a sanctuary. The echo of the violence had finally faded. All that was left was the echo of Trudy's kindness, a romance with humanity that even a monster couldn't extinguish. Justice had been served, but love was the only thing that remained. The echo of Neal Falls. A novel of light, shadow, and the long reach of justice. Prologue. The Last Hug. In a small town of East Hampton, Connecticut, time didn't march. It was a place where the seasons were marked not by the calendar, but by the scent of wood smoke in the autumn, and the specific, crisp bite of the air near Lake Pocatop. Gertrude Trudy Achakowski was the town's heartbeat. If you lived in East Hampton in 1998, you knew her touch. She was a woman of 60 years, but her soul felt ancient and yet strangely youthful, a caregiver by trade and by nature. To receive a hug from Trudy was to be reminded that the world was, despite its jagged edges, fundamentally safe. She held you with a strength that suggested she was taking a portion of your burdens onto her own shoulders. On that Sunday night in late October, the air was turning. Trudy was at the laundromat, a mundane chore that felt like a ritual. Her little dog waited in the car, his breath fogging the windows. The rhythm of the washing machines was a lullaby. She was thinking about a new apartment, a fresh start away from the shadow that had been lingering outside her window lately. She didn't know that the shadow had a name. She didn't know that within 24 hours, the town's innocents would be found face down in the cold, rushing waters of Ennial Falls. Chapter 1. The Sleepy Town. Sergeant Kelly was a man who believed in the quiet. He was a father of 3, a man whose life was measured in swim practices and school schedules. On that Monday afternoon, he was enjoying the rare luxury of a day off, the kind of afternoon where the only emergency was ensuring his kids had their goggles and towels. East Hampton was a bedroom community, a term that suggested a place where people only came to dream. It hadn't seen a homicide in 10 years. The police department dealt with noise complaints, fender benders, and the occasional teenage mischief. Then, the pager on his belt boozed a sharp, mechanical intrusion. Sergeant Kelly, the voice on the other end, was strained. It was the station. "We need you. There's been a discovery at Ennial Falls. It's bad." As Kelly drove toward the falls, the golden autumn light felt suddenly mocking. Ennial Falls was a local hangout, a place of secret teenage kisses and stone-throwing contests. It was a place of life. When he arrived, he saw the patrol cars already lining the remote road. The officers stood like statues, their faces pale against the backdrop of the vibrant trees. "What do we have?" Kelly asked, his voice steadying the younger officers. "Some kids found her," Officer Martin Swan replied, pointing down toward the stream. "About 3 feet of water, hands tied." Kelly descended the sound of the waterfall, usually a peaceful white noise, now sounded like a roar. He saw her then. Even before they turned her over, there was something about the way she lay there, a stillness that felt like a puncture wound in the town's history. When the medical examiner finally turned the body, a collective gasp seemed to ripple through the woods. "Trudy," someone whispered. It was Trudy Achakowski, the woman who gave the hugs, the woman who cared for the sick. She was face down in the mud, her dignity stripped away by a length of duct tape and a heartless dump. Chapter 2. The Running Engine. While the crime scene technicians began the grim task of processing the stream, Officer Swan recounted the morning's strange discovery. At 7:40 a.m., hours before the body was found, Swan had been called to the local laundromat. A car was idling in the lot, its engine humming, a lonely tune in the morning mist. Inside, a small dog was barking frantically, jumping from the front seat to the back. The car was registered to Trudy, Swan said. Her purse was on the front seat, cash-eyed credit cards untouched, and inside the laundromat, a load of laundry was sitting in a machine, wet and forgotten. This was the first ripple of the tragedy. Trudy would never leave her dog. She would never leave her laundry. She was a woman of order, of care. To leave her dog in a running car meant that whatever had happened, it had happened with terrifying speed. Kelly walked through the laundromat later that evening. The smell of detergent was sickeningly sweet. He looked at the machine where Trudy's clothes still sat. It was a domestic scene, interrupted by a nightmare. Who had been watching her? The investigation turned immediately to the men in her life. There was Ray Brown, a man she had been seeing casually. He was brought into the station, his eyes red with genuine shock. "I liked her," Ray said, his voice trembling. She just wanted to be friends, really. But she was so kind." Ray had an alibi, the kind of alibi a detective dreams of. He had been at a bowling tournament, surrounded by dozens of witnesses, including several off-duty police officers from Kelly's own department. Ray was out. Then there was the peeping Tom. Neighbors spoke of a man lurking near Trudy's apartment windows. Kelly felt a surge of hope, a predator, but the hope died quickly. The prime suspect for the window peeping was a local petty criminal named Eddie. "Eddie's a good boy," his mother insisted at his doorstep. "He's also in jail," Kelly muttered as he checked the records. Eddie had been locked up for another crime during the time Trudy disappeared. The list of names was shrinking, and the shadow was growing. Chapter 3. The Missing Lens. The autopsy was a clinical descent into horror. Trudy had been beaten, sexually assaulted. It was a crime of pure, unadulterated rage. But as the medical examiner worked, 2 tiny details emerged, details that would haunt Kelly for the next 15 years. "Look at her eyes," the examiner said. She has a blue-tinted contact lens in the left eye. The right one is missing. He moved to her hair, carefully combing through the matted strands. And this, it's a gold backing for an earring, but the earring itself is gone. A missing blue lens, a missing gold earring. These weren't lost at the falls, Kelly realized. She was killed somewhere else. We're looking at a dump site. We need to find a room where she lost that lens. Kelly returned to his office, a mounting frustration boiling beneath his calm exterior. He began to look at the laundromat again, not just the machines, but the building itself. It was an old structure, with apartments on the upper floors, some of them under renovation. A few days later, a carpenter working on the third floor of the laundromat building was sweeping up sawdust. Something caught the lighter glint of gold. He picked it up. It was a gold earring. Kelly was on the scene within minutes. The apartment was a skeleton of wood and plaster. The major crime squad was called in. They didn't just find the earring. They found the blue contact lens, stuck to the floorboards like a tiny accusing eye. "This is it," Kelly whispered. "This is where she died." The carpenter told them that only 2 people had keys to that specific apartment. One was the owner, Frank, who was out of town with a solid alibi. The other was the maintenance man, a man named Brian. Chapter 2: The Maintenance Man. Brian Tootle was a ghost in the machinery of East Hampton. He was a local man from a well-known family, but he carried a darkness that he kept carefully tucked behind a facade of niceness. When Kelly first brought him in, he noticed the scratch, a long, red, jagged line running from Tuttle's eyebrow to his nose. "Work accident," Tuttle said, his voice flat. But Kelly didn't see a work accident. He saw the desperate, final struggle of a woman fighting for her life. Tootle was nervous, his hand shaking as he lit a cigarette. He denied even knowing Trudy. "Never talked to her," he claimed. "Don't know who she is." It was a lie. In a small town, everyone knew Trudy. Witnesses quickly came forward saying they had seen Tuttle talking to her about the very apartment where she died. Trudy was looking for a new place, and Tuttle had used that need, that innocent desire for a fresh start, to lure her into his trap. Kelly watched Tuttle smoke. He watched the man stub out the cigarette butts in the ashtray. In 1998, DNA was a burgeoning science, a miracle that was still out of reach for many small departments. But Kelly was a man of foresight. He didn't have the technology to link Tuttle's saliva to the crime yet, but he knew that science was a river that only flowed forward. He bagged the cigarette butts. "I'll wait," Kelly thought, "however long it takes." Chapter 5: The Blue Volvo and the Long Silence. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was mounting. Tuttle's girlfriend, Denise, told a story of a man out of control. "He's back on the drugs," she told Kelly, her voice full of fear. "He caught me with someone else, or he thought he did. He went crazy. He took my car." "What kind of car, Denise?" "A Volvo, blue-green." It matched the witness description of the car scene on the bridge at Ennill Falls. Then, Tuttle's cousin called. Tuttle had asked him to hide the car in a remote area. The cousin, sensing the weight of a secret he didn't want to carry, brought the car to the police. Instead, inside the car, they found a fluid stain. The lab confirmed it was Trudy, but they couldn't prove Tuttle was the one who put it there. There was no amplification of DNA. The prosecutor shook his head. "It's not enough for a conviction. Kelly, we get one shot at this. If we lose now, he walks forever." So, the case went cold. Weeks turned into months, months into years. Kelly stayed in East Hampton. He saw Trudy's daughters in the grocery store. He saw the question in their eyes every time they passed. Why hasn't he been arrested? Why is he still free? He felt the weight of the town's judgment. They thought the small-town cops had botched it. They thought the murderer had won. But every year, Kelly would call the crime lab. "Is the technology there yet? Can we test the butts? Can we test the car seat?" Chapter 6: The Ghost of 2013. 15 years later, the world had changed. The pager was a relic of the past. DNA was no longer a miracle. It was a standard. In 2013, the call finally came. "Sergeant Kelly, we have a match. The DNA from the semen in the car matches. The saliva on the cigarette butts you submitted in 1998. It's him. It's Brian Tuttle." Tuttle was found in South Carolina. He wasn't the monster, Kelly remembered. He was morbidly obese, confined to a wheelchair, hooked up to an oxygen tank. "Karma," the town whispered. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The science spoke for him. The blue lens, the gold earring, the boxy Volvo, and the microscopic strands of DNA had formed a net that finally tightened. Epilogue: the hug that remained. In 2016, Brian Tuttle pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his numbered days in a concrete cellar, small, gray world for a man who had taken the light from so many others. Sergeant Kelly stood at Eniel Falls one last time after the sentencing. The water still rushed over the stones. The trees were still vibrant. The town was still sleepy. But the shadow was gone. Trudy Etchikowski was more than a victim. She was a reminder that even in a world where monsters hide in maintenance closets, there are men who will wait 15 years to keep a promise. The hugs she gave weren't forgotten. They lived on in the daughters who finally found peace, in the detective who never stopped calling the lab, and in the quiet streets of East Hampton, where people could finally sleep without wondering who was watching from the window. Justice, like the water at Eniel Falls, had finally found its way home. The Echoes of Eniel Falls. A novel of Bell. Prologue: The Last Hug. In the small town of East Hampton, Connecticut, known to locals as Belltown for its history of brass and chimester, air in November usually carried the scent of wood smoke and damp oak leaves. It was a place where everyone knew your name, your mother's maiden name, and exactly which pew you sat in on Sunday morning. Gertrude Trudy Etchikowski was the soul of that town. At 60 years old, she didn't just walk through East Hampton. She moved through it like a gentle breeze, leaving a trail of comfort in her wake. She was a woman built of soft edges and a heart that seemed too large for her chest. As a home health aide, she spent her days tending to the forgotten, elderly whose children had moved to the city, the sick who needed a hand to hold while the shadows grew long. Trudy believed in love, not the cinematic, explosive kind, but the quiet, enduring love of a shared cup of tea or a dog's loyal bark. She was looking for a fresh start, a new apartment where she could feel safe. She didn't know that the shadows were already closing in. She didn't know that on a cold Monday in 1998, the bells of East Hampton would toll for her in a way the town would never forget. Chapter 1: The Caregiver's Morning. The sun had not yet crested the horizon when Trudy's alarm clock chirped. It was Sunday, November 11th. Her small apartment was quiet, save for the rhythmic breathing of her little dog, a feisty companion who went everywhere with her. Trudy stretched, her joints complaining slightly from the years of lifting patients and standing on her feet. She looked at the framed photo on her nightstand, her daughters. They were her pride, her North Stars. Everything she did, every shift she worked, was rooted in the hope that they would always feel the warmth she tried to provide for the world. "Come on, little one," she whispered to the dog. "We have laundry to do, and then we'll see about that new apartment." She had been feeling uneasy lately. There had been a manure, the shadow of one outside her window, a peeping Tom. The neighbors whispered. She had mentioned it to her friend Ray Brown, a man she had gone on a few dates with. Ray was kind, a good man by all accounts, but the spark Trudy had once known with her ex-boyfriend, Harold, wasn't there. She saw Ray as a friend, a steady harbor, but her heart still yearned for something she couldn't quite name. By 7 p.m. that evening, the sky was a bruised purple. Trudy pulled her car into the parking lot of the local laundromat. It was a routine chore, the kind of mundane task that grounds a life. She loaded the machines, the rhythmic sloshing of the water providing a meditative backdrop to her thoughts. She was thinking about the apartment Brian Tuttle had mentioned. Brian was the maintenance man for the building, a local guy, always around, always helpful in that quiet, slightly off-putting way that people in small towns often overlook. He had told her about a vacancy on the 3rd floor. It was perfect. It was close. It was a chance to leave the shadows of her current window behind. She didn't notice the blue-green Volvo idling at the edge of the lot. She didn't see the glossy, bloodshot eyes watching her from across the street. Chapter 2: The Sergeant's Day Off. Sergeant Kelly was a man of tradition. On his days off, the badge stayed in the drawer, but the detective never truly turned off. It was Monday, November 12th. The smell of chlorine and the sound of splashing water were interrupted by the sharp, insistent chirp of his pager. In 1998, a pager meant one thing. The world had stopped turning the way it was supposed to. "I have to go into the office," he told his kids, his voice steady but his mind already racing. East Hampton was a sleepy bedroom community. They hadn't seen a homicide in 10 years. The biggest drama usually involved a property line dispute or a teenager driving too fast near the lake. But when he arrived at the station, the atmosphere was different. It was heavy. "We have a body, Sarge," Officer Martin Swan said, his face pale, down at Ennial Falls. Ennial Falls was a local hangout, a place where high school kids went to skip class or share their first kiss behind a curtain of falling water. It was a place of innocence. Kelly drove toward the remote area, the winding roads of East Hampton blurring past. When he arrived, the scene was surreal. The autumn woods were vibrant with reds and golds, but in the shallow, freezing water of the stream lay a woman. She was face down. Her hands were tied behind her back with silver duct tape. "Let's turn her over," the medical examiner muttered. As the body was rotated, the breath left Kelly's lungs. He didn't see a victim. He saw Trudy. He saw the woman who had hugged half the town. He saw the mother of the girls he knew from the local schools. "This isn't a crime scene," Kelly whispered, looking at the drag marks on the pavement and the tire tracks leading away. "This is a dump site." The hunt for a monster in Belltown had begun. Chapter 3: The Blue Lens and the Gold Earring. The investigation moved like a fever dream. Kelly spent hours in the autopsy room, a place of cold steel and clinical silence that stood in stark contrast to the woman Trudy had been. "Manual strangulation," the medical examiner concluded. "Brutal. There's bruising on the face. Signs of a struggle. She fought, Kelly. She fought hard." Kelly leaned in, his eyes scanning for the tiny details that killers always leave behind. "Wait," Kelly said, pointing. "Look at her eyes." Trudy wore colored contact lenses, a small vanity for a woman who spent her life caring for others. There was a blue lens in her left eye. The right eye was bare. "And her hair," the examiner noted, pulling a small, glinting object from the gray blonde strands. It was the backing to a gold earring. Just the backing. The earring itself was gone. "A missing lens and a missing earring," Kelly noted in his ledger. "If we find those, we find the room where she died." Outside the lab, the town was screaming. The Belltown chimes felt like funeral dirges. Every man in town was a suspect. Ray Brown, the suitor, was brought in. He was devastated, but his alibi was ironclad. He had been at a bowling tournament with several other police officers. Then there was Harold Jameson, His story was the kind of tragedy only a small town could produce. "I saw her car," Harold told Kelly, his voice cracking. "Sunday night, I saw her car running in front of the laundromat. The dog was barking. I waited for her. I wanted to apologize for a fight we had weeks ago, but she never came out. I thought she was avoiding me, so I went home." Kelly stared at him. It was a terrible alibi. It was the kind of truth that sounded like a lie. If Harold had just walked inside, if he had just checked, Trudy might still be alive. But guilt wasn't the same as murder. Chapter 4: The Carpenter's Discovery. The breakthrough didn't come from a lab or a high-speed chase. It came from a carpenter's saw. A few days later, a man working on renovations in the apartments above the laundromat was cutting through a floorboard when something caught the light. It wasn't a nail or a copper pipe. It was a gold earring, glowing amidst the sawdust. Kelly arrived within minutes. The apartment was a shell under construction, smelling of raw wood and plaster. As the state police major crime squad sifted through the dust, they found it, a tiny, translucent blue disc. Trudy's missing contact lens. This was it. The third floor. A place of isolation. Someone had lured her up here, under the guise of showing her the apartment. Someone she trusted enough to walk into a dark, empty room with. "Who has the keys?" Kelly asked the landlord. "Just me," the landlord replied. "And Brian Tuttle, the maintenance man." Chapter 5: The Man with the Scratch. Brian Tuttle didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had been beaten down by life. When he walked into the station for his interview, Kelly noticed it immediately. A long, jagged scratch running from his eyebrow to the bridge of his nose. "Caught it on a branch at work," Tuttle said, his voice a low, nervous rumble. He was sketchy. He was vibrating with a hidden frequency of guilt. Kelly checked his record, and the blood in his veins turned to ice. Tuttle had a prior conviction for abduction and sexual assault. He was a predator who had been released back into the wild of a sleepy town. "Did you know Trudy?" Kelly asked. "No," Tuttle snapped. "Never met her." It was the first lie. In East Hampton, everyone knew Trudy. The regulars at the laundromat had seen them talking. The owners of the pizza place across the street had seen him watching her. Tuttle claimed he didn't drive. He said his license was suspended. He said he had been at the pizza place drinking away his sorrows because his girlfriend Denise, had cheated on him. Kelly visited the pizza place. The owners remembered Tuttle that night. He wasn't just drinking. He was spiraling. He was angry. He was looking for a target for his rage. Then, Kelly found Denise. "He's a liar," she told the detective. "He didn't catch me cheating. I threw him out because he was back on the bottle and the drugs. And when he left, he took my car." "What kind of car, Denise?" "A Volvo," she said. "Blue-green, boxy style." The same car a witness had seen parked on the bridge at Enniel Falls in the early hours of Monday morning. Chapter 6. The Long Silence. Kelly had the car. He had the crime scene. He even had a cousin of Tuttle's who confessed that Brian had asked him to hide the Volvo in a remote woods. Inside the car, the techs found a stain on the seat. The lab confirmed it. Trudy's DNA. But it was 1998. DNA technology was in its infancy. They could prove Trudy had been in the car, but they couldn't prove Tuttle had been the one driving her. They couldn't link his biological profile to the assault in a way that would hold up in front of a jury. "We can't arrest him yet," the prosecutor said. "It's all circumstantial. If we lose now, he walks forever. Double jeopardy." Kelly felt like he was failing the town. He saw Trudy's daughters in the grocery store. He saw the look, the silent plea for justice that was slowly turning into the silent accusation of inc. "I'm not giving up," Kelly whispered to the file on his desk. He took the cigarette butts Tuttle had smoked during his interview. He sealed them in plastic. He didn't know how, and he didn't know when, but he knew that one day, the science would catch up to the sin. Years turned into a decade. The 90s faded into the 2000s. Kelly's hair turned gray. Tuttle moved away, disappearing into the humidity of South Carolina, thinking he had outrun the ghost of the woman in the water. Chapter 7. The Verdict of Time. The world was a different place. Computers sat in every pocket, and in a lab in Connecticut, a technician looked at a sample that had been sitting in a freezer for 15 years. Using new amplification techniques, they pulled a profile from the semen found on Trudy's remains. They compared it to the DNA on the old, stale cigarette butts Sergeant Kelly had saved from a 1998 interview room. It was a match. The numbers were astronomical. The American detective didn't celebrate. He simply picked up the phone. When the cold case unit found Brian Tuttle in South Carolina, he wasn't the man with the scratch anymore. He was morbidly obese, confined to a wheelchair, hooked up to an oxygen tank. The monster had been eaten from the inside out by his own life. In 2016, he finally pleaded guilty. He didn't offer an apology. He didn't need to. The silence in the courtroom as he was led away to a 6-by-9-foot cell was all the justice Trudy needed. Epilogue. The bell tolls. Trudy Ochakovsky's name is still spoken in East Hampton, not as a victim, but as a reminder. She is remembered in the way a caregiver's hand feels on a fevered brow. She is remembered in the sound of the falls, which no longer feel quite so haunted. Sergeant Keller retired, but he still drives past the laundromat occasionally. He looks up at the third-floor window. He thinks about the blue contact lens and the gold earring. He thinks about the fact that in a world of monsters, there are also men who do not quit. There are detectives who hold on to cigarette butts for 15 years, because they promised a dead woman a hug she could no longer give. The bells of East Hampton chime every hour. They chime for the beauty that was lost, and for the truth that was finally, eventually, found. The Last Hug in East Hampton, Part 2. The Long Shadow of Justice. Chapter 7. The Echoes of a Cold Room. The year was 2002. 4 years had passed since the silver duct tape was cut from Trudy's wrists in the cold waters of the Salmon River. In East Hampton, the initial shock had hardened into a permanent scar. The laundromat had reopened. The machines hummed as they always did, but the third floor remained a ghost. To the locals, it was no longer just an apartment under renovation. It was a tomb. Sergeant Kelly sat in his office at the East Hampton Police Department. The fluorescent lights hummed a lonely, buzzing sound that matched the static in his mind. On his desk sat a cardboard box labeled a Tchaikovsky G case, 98 to 100. He didn't need to open it to know what was inside. He could see the grain of the wood chips in his mind. He could see the gold earring backing that glinted like a dying star. And most of all, he could see the cigarette butts, those filters stained with the saliva of a man he knew was a monster. Still at it, Sarge. Officer Swan leaned against the doorframe, a cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand. Kelly didn't look up. He's out there. Somewhere. He's breathing air that he stole from Trudy. He's drinking beer, watching the sun go down, while her daughters are visiting a headstone. We did everything we could, Swan said softly. The DNA. It just wasn't there. It is there, Kelly snapped, his voice cracking with a rare flash of anger. It's just hiding, waiting for the world to get smart enough to find it. Kelly's obsession had become a quiet legend in the department. He wasn't the loud, table-thumping detective from the movies. He was a man of folders and phone calls. He had become a regular pest to the state police forensic lab. He called so often that the technicians recognized his voice before he even introduced himself. It's Kelly again, they'd sigh. No, Sarge. The amplification technology hasn't changed since last month. Chapter 8. The Professor of Wood. Desperation is a creative force. In 2004, Kelly found himself in a small office surrounded by thousands of slivers of timber. He had sought out a man the department called the Professor of Wood, an FBI consultant who studied the cellular structure of trees as if they were fingerprints. You want me to tell you if these chips in a Volvo seat match a floorboard in a third-story apartment? The professor looked at Kelly through thick spectacles. I need you to tell me they couldn't have come from anywhere else, Kelly corrected. They spent weeks analyzing the fragments. The professor spoke of heartwood and sapwood, of the specific species of pine used in Connecticut construction in the late 90s. He traced the microscopic serrations left by the carpenter's saw. It's a match, Sergeant, the professor finally said. The wood in the car is the same material as the wood in that room. For a moment, Kelly felt a rush of adrenaline. He took the findings to the prosecutor. It's beautiful work, Kelly, the prosecutor said, flipping through the report. Truly, but it's circumstantial. A defense attorney will say Tuttle tracked it in while working. It doesn't prove he had a body in that car. It doesn't prove he killed her. The weight of the small-town cop stigma returned. The whispers in the grocery store were louder now. They missed their chance. They let a killer walk because they didn't know how to handle a big-city crime. Kelly felt every stare like a physical blow. Chapter 9. The Daughter's Sorrow. Trudy's daughters, Kelly and her sister, lived in a world of what-ifs. Every anniversary of the murder, the local paper would run a small piece, unsolved, a word that felt like a sentence. Kelly would meet them occasionally. He couldn't tell them about the wood chips. He couldn't tell them about the cigarette butts in the evidence locker. He could only look them in the eye and offer a promise that was starting to feel hollow. We haven't forgotten, he would say. He's still alive, isn't he? One of them asked during a particularly bitter winter meeting. The man who did it. He's out there getting old, and our mother is still 60. There was no answer for that. Trudy was frozen in timer, woman of hugs and home health care, preserved in the amber of 1998. Meanwhile, Brian Tuttle had vanished into the cracks of the American landscape. He had moved south, following the sun to South Carolina, leaving the cold memory of East Hampton behind him. Chapter 10. The 2013 Breakthrough. The breakthrough didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a quiet email. By 2013, the science of DNA had leaped forward. The term touch DNA and advanced amplification techniques meant that samples once considered insufficient were now gone. The cold case unit had taken an interest. Kelly, now a veteran with more gray in his hair than he cared to admit, stood in the lab as the technician pointed to a computer screen. We pulled it, Sarge, from the fluid stain on the Volvo seat cover. We got a full profile. And Kelly's heart was hammering like a drum. And we ran it against the cigarette butts you've been hoarding for 15 years. It's him. Brian took. The probability of it being anyone else is 1 in several billion. Kelly didn't cheer. He didn't pump his fist. He simply leaned against the cold metal table and closed his eyes. He thought of Trudy's dog barking in the car. He thought of the blue contact lens on the floor. He thought of the 15 years of silence. Get the warrant, Kelly whispered. Let's go get him. Chapter 11. The Monster in the Wheelchair. The arrest took place in South Carolina. A team of investigators, including members of the cold case unit, descended on a small, nondescript home. Kelly had expected a monster. He had expected the man with the angry scratch across his nose, the drunk who had paced the pizza parlor with red, glossy eyes. Instead, they found a shell. Brian Tuttle was morbidly obese, his body failing under the weight of his own choices. He was confined to a wheelchair, tethered to an oxygen tank that hissed with every labored breath. Brian, the lead investigator asked. The man looked up, his eyes dull. He didn't ask what they were there for. He didn't protest. He simply looked at the handcuffs. as if he had been expecting them for a very long time. As they transported him back to Connecticut, Tuttle remained silent. He declined every interview. He didn't need to speak. The DNA was shouting his guilt from every mountaintop. Chapter 12. The Final Plea. The trial in Middletown in 2016 was not the dramatic showdown many expected. There was no grand testimony from Tuttle, no last-minute confession. Seeing him in the courtroom was a shock to the community. This was the man who had rocked East Hampton to its core, this fragile, broken man in a wheelchair. But as the prosecutor laid out the evidence, the duct tape, the wood fragments, the matching DNA from the semen and the cigarette butts, their fragility vanished. The horror of what he had done to a woman who only wanted to help him was laid bare. Trudy had gone into that room innocently. She had believed in the small town's safety. She had likely smiled at him as she walked up those stairs, and he had turned that trust into a nightmare. In a final act of cowardice, or perhaps a sudden realization that there was no escape, Brian Tuttle pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, a sentence that, given his health, was effectively a death warrant. Chapter 13. The Last Hug. After the sentencing, Sergeant Kelly walked out of the courthouse. The air was crisp, much like it had been on that January night in 1998. He saw Trudy's daughters standing on the steps. This time, when he approached them, he didn't have to offer hollow promises. "It's done," he said. They didn't speak. They simply stepped forward and hugged him. It was a long, silent embrace. In that moment, Kelly understood what the town had been saying all those years. Trudy's hugs had made people feel safe, and though she was gone, this hug is final. Collective release of 15 years of pain felt like her final gift. Kelly drove back to East Hampton. He stopped by Anneal Falls. The water was still rushing over the rocks, eternal and indifferent to the dramas of men. He thought about his career, the big one. He'd always wanted to solve. It hadn't been about glory. It had been about a 60-year-old woman and a blue contact lens. He was a small-town cop, and he had brought the monster home. East Hampton was still a sleepy bedroom community. But that night, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the town slept a little more soundly. The shadow was gone. The case was closed. And Trudy Etchikowski was finally at peace. The last safe place. Prologue. The sleepy town of Echo. East Hampton, Connecticut, was a town where time seemed to move with the slow, rhythmic pulse of the Salmon River. In 1998, it was the quintessential New England bedroom community, a patchwork of rolling hills, historic stone walls, and families who moved there specifically because the world's monsters were supposed to live elsewhere. Here, the geography of one's life was written in the familiar curves of the road and the steady change of the seasons, from the blazing oranges of October to the hushed, white silence of January. At the heart of this piece was Gertrude Trudy Etchikowski. At 60, Trudy didn't just live in East Hampton. She was woven into its very architecture. She was the woman who remembered the names of your children, the one who brought a warm loaf of bread when you were grieving, and the one whose hugs were described by everyone as a fortress. People said that when Trudy wrapped her arms around you, the coldness of the world simply vanished. She was a caregiver by trade and by soul, a home health aide who spent her days tending to those the rest of the world had forgotten. Her life was a romance with humanity itself, built on small acts of kindness that anchored the town's sense of safety. But even in the safest of harbors, the tide can bring in something dark. Beneath the veneer of small-town charm, a shadow had begun to stretch, unnoticed by most, until it was far too late. Chapter 1. The Shadow at the Window. The winter of 1998 was biting. For Trudy, the cold wasn't just in the air. It had begun to seep into her sense of home. Her apartment, once a sanctuary filled with the scent of dried herbs and the soft ticking of her grandmother's clock, had started to feel like a cage. For weeks, she had felt it, the prickle of eyes on her back. It started as a movement in the periphery, a silhouette that vanished when she turned. Then came the peeping Tom, a silent figure that would appear at her window, a dark smudge against the moonlight. He didn't speak, didn't try to break in, but his presence was a violation. Trudy had mentioned it to her daughters and her friends, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't feel right there anymore," she whispered to her friend over tea. "It's like someone is waiting for me to breathe so they can count the seconds." She was looking for a way out, a new beginning. She had even approached the building's maintenance man, Brian Tuttle, about vacant units. Tuttle was a fixture of the building, a large, quiet man with a history that few bothered to look into. To Trudy, he was just another person who needed a kind word, To Tuttle, Trudy was something else entirely. The morning of January 11th began with a heavy frost. Trudy, a creature of habit, loaded her car with laundry. Her little dog, a frantic but fiercely loyal terrier, sat in the passenger seat, his breath fogging the glass. She pulled up to the local laundromat, the engine humming to keep the dog warm. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lavender detergent and the rhythmic thumping of industrial dryers. She was alone, or so she thought, until Brian Tuttle emerged from the back, a heavy set of keys jingling at his waist. "Looking for that new place, Trudy?" he asked. His voice was like gravel being crushed. Trudy forced a smile. "I am, Brian. I just want to feel safe again." "I might have just the thing," Tuttle said, his eyes scanning the empty room before settling on her. "The apartment on the 3rd floor. Renovations are nearly done. It's quiet. No one can see in from the street. You want to take a peek? It won't take a minute." Trudy glanced at the door. Her dog was waiting. The car was running. But the promise of a sanctuary was a siren song. "Just a minute," she agreed. She followed him toward the stairs, leaving the warmth of the laundromat for the cold, unfinished silence of the upper floors. Chapter 2. The Fall of Eniel. The high school kids arrived at Eniel Falls at 3 o'clock the next afternoon. For them, the falls were a place of rebellion, a hidden clearing, where the water tumbled over granite rocks, and the world of teachers and parents felt miles away. It was a Monday, the air crisp and clear, but the usual laughter died the moment they stepped toward the stream. They saw a splash of color that didn't belong to the gray and brown of the winter woods. A pale shape bobbed in the 3-foot-deep water. As they moved closer, the horror crystallized. It was a woman. She was face down, her floral blouse darkened by the freezing current. Her hands were bound behind her back with silver duct tape, the metallic sheen jarring against the natural beauty of the falls. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound of the waterfall. Sergeant Kelly was miles away, enjoying a rare afternoon of normalcy. He was at the local pool, watching his 3 children during swim practice. The smell of chlorine and the sound of splashing water were a world away from the darkness he usually navigated. Then, the pager on his belt erupted. "Code 1. Report to precinct immediately." When Kelly arrived at Eniel Falls, he found a scene out of an Alfred Hitchcock nightmare. He stood on the bridge, looking down at the body. He knew every face in this town, but he prayed he didn't know this one. As the medical examiner turned the body over, the collective breath of the officer's presence seemed to catch. It was Trudy. Her face, usually so full of light, was a map of violence, bruised and swollen from a brutal struggle. "This isn't where it happened," Kelly said, his voice cold and sharp as a razor. "There's no blood on the rocks. No sign of a struggle here. He killed her somewhere else and dumped her here like she was nothing." The investigation began in the mud. They found tire tracks and drag marks leading from the pavement, but more importantly, they noticed what was missing. Trudy's right eye was missing its blue-tinted contact lens. In her hair, tangled in the gray strands, was the backing of a gold earring. The earring itself was gone. "Find that earring," Kelly told his team, "and find that lens. They're the keys to her room." Chapter 3. The Web of Suspects. The news of Trudy's murder hit East Hampton like a physical blow. The sleepy town woke up to a reality where a monster walked among them. Kelly's first stop was the men in Trudy's life. There was Ray Brown, a gentle soul who had taken Trudy on a few dates. He wept openly in the interrogation room. "She was the best of us," he sobbed. His alibi was solid. He had been at a bowling tournament with several off-duty cops. He was ruled out, but his grief remained a permanent fixture of the case. Then there was Harold Jameson, an on-again, off-again boyfriend. Harold's story was troubling. He admitted to being near the laundromat the night Trudy vanished. He saw her car idling, the dog barking inside. "Why didn't you do anything?" Kelly pressed, the tension in the room thick enough to choke. I thought we were on bad terms," Harold whispered. "I didn't want to be the guy hovering. I just went home." Harold was a blockhead, perhaps, but was he a killer? His car was searched, his clothes analyzed. Nothing. No duct tape, no blood, no wood chips. He was a man who had failed Trudy in her final hour, but he wasn't the one who had taken her life. The breakthrough came a few days later, not from a detective, but from a carpenter working on the 3rd floor of the laundromat building. He had been cutting through old floorboards when something glinted in the sawdust. It was a gold earring. Kelly arrived on the scene with the state police major crime squad. As they meticulously sifted through the dust and debris of the unfinished apartment, they found the second miracle, a single, blue-tinted contact lens. "This is it," Kelly whispered. "This is the tomb." The apartment was a construction site, but to Kelly, it was a map of a struggle. The finding of the crime scene narrowed the hunt. Who had access? Who had the keys? Who felt comfortable enough to commit such a crime in a building they knew? Chapter 4. The Monster in the Light. Brian Tuttle became the prime suspect the moment his name appeared on the maintenance logs. When Kelly dug into Tuttle's past, the sleepy town facade shattered completely. Tuttle had a prior conviction for abduction and sexual assault. He was a predator who had found a job that gave him keys to every door in town. When Tuttle came in for his first interview, he looked like any other blue-collar worker, but his face told a different story. A long, angry scratch ran from his eyebrow to the bridge of his nose. "Caught it on a doorframe at work," Tuttle said, his eyes never meeting Kelly. "Trudy fought back, didn't she, Brian?" Kelly asked, his voice low and dangerous. "She wasn't going to go quietly. She marked you." Tuttle denied even knowing her. He sat there, chain-smoking, his hands trembling as he flicked ash into a tray. Kelly watched the way he moved, the nervous energy of a man who knew he had left a trail but didn't know where. The wood expert from the FBI, a man who could identify a tree from a single splinter, confirmed that wood fragments in the car matched the flooring of the third-floor apartment. But the prosecutors were hesitant. "It's circumstantial, Kelly," the DA said. "We have wood and a scratch. In this town, that's not enough for a conviction. If we lose this, he's gone forever. We wait." Kelly had to watch Brian Tuttle walk out of the station. He watched the man disappear into the New England fog, knowing he was letting a killer back into the world. Chapter 5. The Wait of 15 Years. For the next 15 years, Sergeant Kelly lived in a state of suspended animation. The case was cold, but it never left him. He saw Trudy's daughters in town, their eyes always asking the same silent question. He saw the pizza place owners who remembered Tuttle's glossy, drugged-out eyes on the night of the murder. Every year, Kelly would call the state lab. "Any news? Has the technology moved?" He kept the cigarette butts Tuttle had smoked in the interrogation room. He kept the records of the professor of wood. He kept the memory of the blue contact lens. The town moved on. The high school kids who found Trudy became adults with children of their own, but the shadow of 1998 remained. Kelly's obsession was fueled by a sense of romantic duty, not a romance of passion, but a romance of justice. He loved the town enough to never let its greatest wound heal without a scar of truth. In 2013, the phone finally rang. "Kelly, it's the lab. We have enough. The DNA amplification worked, and those cigarette butts you kept, they're a perfect match to the biological material in the car." Chapter 6. Justice in the Dust. They found Brian Tuttle in South Carolina. He was no longer the imposing maintenance man of 1998. He was morbidly obese, confined to a wheelchair, and breathing through an oxygen tank. He looked like a man who had been eaten from the inside out by his own secrets. When he was brought back to Middletown for trial, he didn't have the strength to fight anymore. The DNA evidence was an avalanche. The monsters of East Hampton finally had a name and a face that could be locked away. In 2016, 18 years after the afternoon at Eniel Falls, Brian Tuttle pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison. On the day of the sentencing, Kelly stood in the back of the courtroom. He thought about Trudy's final moments, the terror in that unfinished apartment, the cold water of the stream. But he also thought about her hugs. He realized that while Tuttle had taken her life, he hadn't taken her legacy. Justice had been a marathon, not a sprint. It had required a rare kind of Piacenza romantic belief that the truth, no matter how long it stayed buried in the sawdust, would eventually find its way to the light. Epilogue: The Echoes of Kindness. Trudy Tchaikovsky is still missed in East Hampton. People still talk about her lavender-scented laundry and the way she made every stranger feel like a friend. The last safe place wasn't the town itself, but the people like Trudy who lived within it. Sergeant Kelly eventually retired, his hair grayer, his heart a bit heavier, but his soul at peace. He still visits Eniel Falls occasionally. He doesn't see a dump site anymore. He sees a place where a community's heart was broken, and then, slowly, painstakingly, mended by the relentless pursuit of the truth. The waterfall continues to flow, washing away the winter frost, a reminder that while darkness can visit, it can never truly call East Hampton home. Author's note: This novelization is an expanded adaptation based on the real-life investigation into the murder of Gertrude O'Shea. It honors the memory of a woman who lived for others and the detective who refused to let her be forgotten. The Echo of Enyo Falls, a novel. Prologue. The heartbeat of Pocatawp. In the small town of East Hampton, Connecticut, life followed the rhythmic lap of Lake Pocatawpog against the shore. It was a place where generations grew up under the same oak trees, where secrets were whispered over picket fences, and where the passage of time was marked not by the ticking of a clock, but by the warmth of a neighbor's greeting. To live here was to be part of a tapestry, woven tightly with threads of shared history and mutual care. At the center of this tapestry was Gertrude Trudy. At 60 years old, Trudy didn't just walk through East Hampton. She graced it. As a home health aide, she was the town's silent sentinel of mercy. Her hands, soft but strong, had held the trembling fingers of the dying and bathed the brows of the feverish. She was a woman who saw the romance in a simple cup of tea, the poetry in a clean sheet, and the divine in a heartfelt hug. To Trudy, every soul was a project of love. She lived in a modest apartment, her world punctuated by the rhythmic, joyful barking of her small dogger creature, who saw her as the sun itself. She found beauty in the mundane, the silver steam of a laundromat, the crisp November air, and the anticipation of a quiet evening. But in late 1998, a shadow stretched over the lake, a shadow that didn't belong to the changing seasons, but to something far more ancient and far more cruel. The heartbeat of East Hampton was about to skip a beat, and then it would stop entirely. Chapter 1. The Silent Watcher. The morning of November 11th arrived with a bite that suggested winter was no longer content to wait its turn. A gray mist clung to the ground, obscuring the familiar landmarks of the town. Trudy followed her routine with the precision of a woman who knew her time was a gift to others. She had laundry to do, a mundane chore that she approached with her usual quiet dignity. She pulled her car into the lot of the local laundromat, the engine humming a steady tune. Her dog sat in the passenger seat, watching her with perked ears. "I'll be right back, sweetie," she whispered, a promise she had made 1,000 times before. Inside, the laundromat was a cathedral of steam and the scent of lavender detergent. Trudy loaded the machines, the rhythmic thump-thump of the washers providing a comforting backdrop to her thoughts. She was looking for a new apartment, something safer, something away from the unsettling feeling that someone had been watching her windows. She hadn't told her daughters the full extent of her fear. She didn't want to worry them. She was the caretaker after all. She was the one who provided the safety. Outside, the engine of her car continued to idle, a mechanical heartbeat in the cold morning air. But the door to the laundromat didn't open again for a very long time. At 7:40 a.m., Officer Martin Swan cruised into the parking lot. He had been dispatched for a nuisance call, a car running 4 hours, a dog barking until its voice was a raspy plea. He expected a distracted teenager or someone who had simply forgotten. What he found was a void. The car was warm, the dog frantic, clawing at the glass. On the front seat sat Trudy's purse, undisturbed, her ID, her credit cards. Her cash, it was all there, a life left in suspension. Inside the laundromat, Swan found a washer full of wet clothes. Trudy's clothes. They were cold to the touch, the cycle having finished long ago. The air in the room felt suddenly heavy, charged with a static of dread. In East Hampton, people didn't vanish into thin air. They didn't leave their dogs in running cars. "Trudy," Swan called out. His voice hit the tile walls and bounced back, hollow and unanswered. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a presence of something terrible. Chapter 2. The Summons at the Pool. Sergeant Kelly was enjoying the rare, golden light of a day off. He stood by the edge of the local pool, the smell of chlorine, a sharp contrast to the crisp autumn air outside. He watched his 3 children splash and dive, their laughter the most beautiful music he knew. For a few hours, he wasn't a detective. He was just a father. Then, the pager on his belt erupted a frantic, staccato vibration that cut through the domestic peace. The code was 187. Homicide. Location. Enyo Falls. The transition from father to investigator was a violent wrenching of the soul. He kissed his wife, gathered his children, and within 30 minutes, he was driving toward the remote outskirts of town. Enyo Falls was a place of local legend, a rugged stretch of stream where the water tumbled over moss-covered rocks. It was where teenagers went to share first cigarettes and clumsy. It was a place of youth. But as Kelly pulled up to the bridge, the youth had been sucked out of the air. 2 high school boys stood by a patrol car, their faces the color of ash. They had been throwing rocks into the stream when they saw it. "What do we have, Romano?" Kelly asked, stepping out into the damp chill of the woods. Sergeant Romano looked at him, his eyes filled with a weariness that went beyond lack of sleep. "A woman, Sergeant, hands bound with duct tape. It's..." Kelly made his way down the steep embankment, his boots slipping on the wet leaves. The water was shallow, barely 3 feet deep, clear and cold. He looked down and felt a physical blow to his chest. The woman lay there, her floral dress billowing in the current, like a tragic underwater blossom. Her hands were pulled behind her back, secured with heavy silver tape. Even through the distorted lens of the water, Kelly recognized the kindness in the set of her shoulders. "Turn her over," the medical examiner commanded. As the body was rotated, the mist seemed to thicken. The face that emerged from the stream belonged to Gertrude Utcher. The woman who had comforted the town was now its greatest tragedy. "It's Trudy," Kelly whispered, the words tasting like copper in his mouth. "My God, it's Trudy." Chapter 3. The Anatomy of a Nightmare. To see her on the stainless steel table was a violation that felt personal. Manual strangulation, Themi noted, his voice clinical, detached a necessary defense against the horror. She fought. Kelly. Look at the bruising on the forearms, the scrapings under the nails. She didn't go quietly. Tie brewing, Trudy fighting for her breath, in a dark apartment while the town slept was almost too much to bear. "There's more," Themi said, leaning closer with a magnifying glass. Her eyes, she wore tinted contacts. "Blue. Only the left one is here. The right eye is bare." He then moved to her hair, gently parting the gray strands. "And this," he held up a tiny, glinting object with a pair of tweezers. "A gold earring backing. Just the back. The earring itself is missing." Kelly leaned in, his mind already racing. A missing lens, a missing earring. These weren't just details. They were crumbs left on a trail. "She left us a map," Kelly murmured. "She fought so hard she tore pieces of herself and her killer away. We just have to find where they landed." Themi also confirmed the violence of the struggle, bruising to the face and head, and signs of a brutal sexual assault. It wasn't just a murder. It was an execution of the soul. It was a crime born of a deep, festering hatred. Chapter 4. The Ghosts of Likely Men. The investigation began with the heart. In a town like East Hampton, murder was almost always an intimate affair. Kelly started with the men who had orbited Trudy's light. First came Ray Brown. He was a soft-spoken man, a gentleman caller, who had taken Trudy to dinner a few times. When he sat in the interview room, he looked like a man who had lost his anchor. "I loved her, Sergeant," Ray said, his voice a mere thread, "and I was okay with that. Just being near her was enough." His alibi was the bitterest irony of the case. On the night of the murder, Ray had been at a bowling tournament. His witnesses, 6 of Kelly's own patrol officers. Ray was innocent, a man left with nothing but the memory of a woman who had seen him as a friend. The suspect, a local delinquent named Eddie, had been securely locked in a jail cell on the night Trudy disappeared. Finally, Kelly turned to Harold Jameson. Harold and Trudy had been a fixture of the town's gossip for years, and on-again, off-again romance that was as weathered as the old docks on the lake. Harold was distraught, his grief manifested as a frantic, scattered energy. "I was there, Kelly," Harold cried out during the interrogation. Kelly leaned forward. "You saw her?" "And I didn't want to be the guy who barged in. I just waited 10 minutes, and then I went home." "He left her car running with the dog inside and just drove away?" Kelly asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. I just didn't think. Harold was a fool, a man paralyzed by his own romantic insecurities, but he wasn't a killer. His car was clean, his story held up, and his pain was too messy to be manufactured. Kelly was back at zero. The killer wasn't in Trudy's circle. He was a shadow outside of it, waiting for the right moment to strike. Chapter 5. The Carpenter's Discovery. The breakthrough didn't come from a high-tech lab or a brilliant deduction. It came from a man with a broom. A carpenter was working on the 3rd floor of the building that housed the laundromat. It was an old structure, undergoing renovations, full of the smell of raw pine and ancient dust. As he swept near a pile of wood shavings, he saw a glint of gold. He picked it up, thinking it was a brass tack. It was an earring, a delicate gold stud. He He had heard the news of Trudy's murder, just like everyone else in town. He called the station immediately. Kelly arrived at the building within minutes. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The third floor, above the laundromat. Search every inch. Kelly ordered the crime scene unit. Look for anything that doesn't belong. The technicians moved with the slow, deliberate grace of archaeologists. An hour into the search, one of them let out a low whistle. There, nestled in a crevice between the floorboards, was a tiny, translucent disc, a blue-tinted contact lens. "We found it," Kelly whispered. She had walked into this room with a heart full of trust, and she had met a monster. "Who has access to this floor?" Kelly asked the landlord. "Just me," the landlord stammered, his face white. "And the maintenance man, Brian." Chapter 6. The Man with the Scarred Face. Brian Tuttle was a man who blended into the gray background of the town. He was a handyman, a man of good family, who fixed boilers and patched roofs. He was the kind of person you saw every day and never truly looked at. But when he walked into the station for questioning, Kelly looked. He looked with the intensity of a hawk. Across Toodle's face, running from his eyebrow down to the bridge of his nose, was a deep, angry scratch. It was fresh, the edges still pink and raw. "That's a hell of a mark," Brian Keeley said, leaning back in his chair, trying to keep the predation out of his voice. "How'd you get it?" "Work," Tuttle replied, his eyes darting to the corners of the room. "Slipped with a pry bar." "I know," Kelly said softly. "I also know that Gertrude Achikowski is missing an earring and a contact lens, and we found them in the room you were working in." Tuttle didn't flinch. He was a wall of cold, flat denials. He claimed he didn't even know Trudy. In a town of 9,000 people, where Trudy was the most famous hugger in the county, he claimed she was a stranger. It was the first lie. It wouldn't be the last. He was a predator who had served his time and returned to the hunting grounds, masquerading as a humble worker. But there were no fingerprints, no DNA in 1998 that could be processed quickly. There was only the scratch on his face and the lie in his mouth. As Tuttle left the station, he dropped a few cigarette butts in the ashtray. Kelly didn't empty it. He bagged them. One day, Kelly promised the empty room. One day, the science will catch up to your soul. Chapter 7. The Blue-Green Ghost. The town was beginning to turn on the police. The sleepy bedroom community had become a place of locked doors and suspicious glances. People looked at Kelly at the grocery store with eyes that asked, "Why is he still walking free?" Then, a witness came forward. A woman who had been at a bus stop near Annual Falls on the morning the body was found. She had seen a car parked on the bridge, a boxy, bluish-green sedan. Kelly tracked down Tuttle's girlfriend, Denise. "He's a different man when he drinks," Denise told Kelly, her voice trembling as she sat on her porch. "He caught me with someone else." He went into a rage. "He's been on a bender for days." "Did he take your car?" Kelly asked. "Yes," she said, pointing to the empty driveway. "My Volvo, very boxy." The pieces of the nightmare were clicking into place with a sickening finality. Tuttle, fueled by a toxic mix of alcohol and the rage of being rejected by his girlfriend, had walked out of a pizza parlor. He had seen Trudy, a woman who represented the kind of grace and goodness he could never possess. He had lured her to the third floor with a lie about an apartment for rent. Chapter 8. The Professor of Wood. The investigation entered a surreal phase. Kelly was desperate for a Lincoln-y thing to tie Tuttle to the car, and the car to the crime scene. "We found wood chips in the Volvo," Kelly told his chief, "and wood chips at the crime scene in the apartment. So, it's a construction site. Kelly, wood is everywhere." "Not this wood," Kelly insisted. He tracked down an FBI expert, a man known in the Bureau as the Professor of Wood. The expert analyzed the fragments found in the carpet of the blue-green Volvo. He compared them to the shavings from the third-floor apartment. "They match, Sergeant," the professor concluded. "The species, the cut, the age of the timber. This car was at that construction site." It was brilliant science, but in the late 90s, it was junk science to a prosecutor. They wanted DNA. They wanted a CSI moment that didn't yet exist in a small-town courtroom. The case went cold. Chapter 9. The years in East Hampton began to blur. 1999 became 2005. 2005 became 2012. Kelly's children grew up and left for college. He saw his own hair turn gray in the station mirror. Every day, he walked past the evidence locker where the cigarette butts and the blue-green seat covers were stored. They were his silent companions. No one spoke of the case, but the silence was a heavy, suffocating weight. Kelly never stopped calling the lab. Every time a new technique was announced, touch DNA, mitochondrial sequencing, he was the first on the phone. Is it time yet? Not yet, Sergeant Ethe would reply. He lived with the ghost of Trudy. He saw her in the way the light hit the lake. He heard her in the rustle of the leaves at Enyel Falls. He was a man obsessed, a romantic in a world of cold facts, believing that the truth had a heartbeat of its own. Chapter 10. The Arc of Justice. In 2013, the phone rang. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 15 years after the pager had first gone off. Kelly, the voice from the state lab, said, "We ran the samples from the Volvo and the DNA from the cigarette butts you kept." Kelly gripped the desk, his knuckles white, and we found his profile in the biological material from the victim. He simply closed his eyes and let out a breath he had been holding since 1998. The darkness he had carried had seemingly rotted him from the inside out. When he was brought back to Connecticut, he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The science spoke for him. In 2016, 18 years after Trudy Ochakowski's heartbeat stopped. Epilogue: The Last Hug. The courtroom in Middletown was packed. The people of East Hampton had come to see the end of the shadow. Trudy's daughters sat in the front row, holding hands. They looked at the photo of their mother, the one where she was laughing, her eyes bright with the blue lenses that had eventually trapped her killer. Tuttle was sentenced to life in prison. As he was wheeled out of the courtroom, his oxygen tank hissing, he looked like a man already in a tomb. Kelly stood at the back of the room. He felt a strange warmth on his shoulders, a sensation of peace that he hadn't felt in nearly 2 decades. The town of East Hampton was still a sleepy bedroom community, but the dreams were safer now. He drove out to Enyel Falls that evening. It was no longer a dump site. It was just a stream. The romance of Trudy's life had outlasted the violence of her death. Justice hadn't been a sprint. It had been a slow, agonizing walk through the dark, led by the light of a woman who never met a stranger she couldn't love. Kelly watched the sun set over the trees. "We got him, Trudy," he whispered. And in the rustle of the wind, he could almost hear the answer. Author's note: this novel is an expanded dramatization of the real-life investigation led by Sergeant Kelly of the East Hampton Police Department, while certain dialogues and internal monologues have been reimagined for narrative depth. The Echo of Enyel Falls. A novel of light, shadow, and the long reach of justice. Prologue: The Last Hug. In the small town of East Hampton, Connecticut, time didn't march. It was a place where the seasons were marked, not by the calendar, but by the scent of wood smoke in the autumn and the specific, crisp bite of the air near Lake Pool. The town was a sanctuary of brick buildings, ancient oaks, and the kind of familiarity that felt like a warm blanket. Everyone knew the rhythm of the church bells, the creak of the old bridge, and the faces of their neighbors. She was a woman of 60 years, but her soul felt ancient, and yet strangely youthful, a caregiver, by trade and by nature. To receive a hug from Trudy was to be reminded that the world was, despite its jagged edges, fundamentally safe. She held you with a strength that suggested she was taking a portion of your burdens onto her own shoulders. Her eyes, often hidden behind soft-trimmed glasses, held the wisdom of a woman who had seen the best and worst of humanity and chosen to believe in the best. Trudy was at the laundromat on Main Street, a mundane chore that felt like a ritual. His breath fogging the windows as he watched the door for her return. The rhythm of the washing machines was a lullaby, a steady hum that usually brought peace. But that night, Trudy felt a prickle on the back of her neck. Someone had been watching her. She had seen the flicker of a figure in the bushes, the heavy silence that followed her from the store. She didn't know that the shadow had a name. She didn't know that within 24 hours, the town's innocence would be found face down in the cold, rushing waters of Enyel Falls. Chapter 1. The Monday Discovery. Sergeant Kelly was a man who believed in the quiet. On that Monday afternoon, 3 o'clock was usually the time he'd be thinking about dinner or whether the kids had finished their homework. He was enjoying the rare luxury of a day off, the kind of afternoon where the only emergency was ensuring his kids had their goggles and towels for practice. East Hampton was a bedroom community. The police department dealt with noise complaints, fender benders, and the occasional teenage mischief. Crime was a concept that happened in the cities, in the news, but never on these manicured lawns. Then, the pager on his belt buzzed a sharp, mechanical intrusion that shattered the afternoon's peace. Sergeant Kelly, the voice on the other end was strained, vibrating with an urgency he hadn't heard in years. It was the station. We need you at the falls. Immediately. It's bad, Garrick. It's the kind of bad we don't know how to handle. As Kelly drove toward Enniel Falls, the golden autumn light felt suddenly mocking. Enniel Falls was a local hangout, a place of secret teenage kisses and stone-throwing contests. It was a place of life, of youthful energy. When he arrived, the scene was already swarming. Kelly saw the officers standing like statues, their faces pale, eyes fixed on the ground as if afraid to look up. Kelly asked, his voice steadying the younger officers as he stepped out of his car. Officer Martin Swan pointed down toward the stream, his hand trembling slightly. Some kids. They were throwing rocks from the bridge. They saw something in the water. We thought it was a mannequin at first. It isn't. Kelly descended the embankment. The sound of the waterfall, usually a peaceful white noise, now sounded like a visceral roar, a scream of nature. He saw her then. She lay in about 3 feet of water, face down, her hands tied behind her back with thick, silver duct tape. The cold water rippled over her back, tugging at her clothes. Even before they turned her over, there was a stillness to her that felt like a puncture wound in the town's history. When the medical examiner finally turned the body, a collective gasp rippled through the woods. The air seemed to leave the clearing. Trudy, someone whispered. It was a name that carried 1,000 memories of kindness. Kelly felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just a case. This was a betrayal of everything East Hampton stood for. Chapter 2. The Echo of a Bark. While the crime scene technicians began the grim task of processing the stream, the investigation moved back to the laundromat. Officer Swan recounted the morning's strange discovery, a scene that now felt like the prologue to a tragedy. At 7:40 a.m., hours before the body was found, Swan had been called to the local laundromat lot. A blue car was idling, its engine humming a lonely, rhythmic tune in the morning mist. Inside, Trudy's small dog was barking frantically, jumping from the front seat to the back, his paws scratching at the glass. The car was running all night, Swan said, his voice low. Purse on the front seat, cash ID, credit cards all untouched. No one had been in that purse. Kelly walked into the laundromat later that evening. The smell of detergent was sickeningly sweet, cloying in the stagnant air. He looked at the machine where Trudy's clothes still sat, wet and forgotten in a half-finished cycle. It was a domestic scene interrupted by a nightmare, the ultimate sign of a life suddenly, violently snatched away. Trudy would never leave her dog. She would never leave her laundry. She was a woman of order, of deep care. To leave her dog in a running car meant that whatever had happened, it had happened with terrifying, silent speed. The investigation turned immediately to the men who moved through Trudy's world. There was Ray Brown. They had been on a few dates, a tentative foray into companionship for two people who had spent much of their lives alone. Ray was brought into the station, his eyes red and hollow. "I liked her," Ray said, his voice a ghost of a whisper. She just wanted to be friends, really. She saw the world with so much light. Who would want to put that light out? Ray was out. He was just another victim of the grief now settling over the town. Then there was the peeping Tom. Neighbors spoke of a man lurking near Trudy's windows, a shadow in the night that made her lock her doors twice. Kelly felt a surge of hope, a predator to track. But the prime suspect, a local petty criminal named Eddie, was already behind bars for a different crime. The list of names was shrinking, the shadow was growing, and the town was beginning to realize that the monster wasn't a stranger from the highway. The monster was likely someone they passed every day on Main Street. Chapter 3. The Blue Lens and the Gold Earring. The autopsy was a clinical descent into horror. Trudy had not gone quietly. She had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and it was a crime of pure, unadulterated rage, a punishment for being a woman, for being kind, for being there. But as the medical examiner worked under the harsh fluorescent lights, two tiny details emerged, microscopic pieces of a puzzle that would haunt Kelly for the next 15 years. "Look at her eyes, Sergeant," the examiner said, peering through a magnifying glass. "She has a blue-tinted contact lens in the left eye. The right one, it's missing. Gone." He moved to her hair, carefully combing through the graying strands matted with river silt. "And this, it's a gold backing for an earring. Just the back. The earring itself is missing. A missing blue lens, a missing gold earring." These weren't lost at the falls, Kelly realized, the gears of his mind turning. The falls is a dump site. There were no signs of a struggle there, just drag marks from the pavement. She was killed somewhere else. We find that earring. We find the killer. Kelly returned to his office, the frustration boiling beneath his calm exterior. He began to look at the laundromat again, not just as a place of business, but as a structure. It was an old building with apartments on the upper floors. Some were occupied. Others were skeletons of wood and plaster under renovation. A few days later, a call came in from a carpenter working on the 3rd floor of that very building. He had been sweeping up sawdust when something caught the lighter glint of gold amidst the debris. He had picked it up. It was a gold earring. Kelly arrived at the laundromat building in minutes. The apartment was a hollowed-out shell, smelling of fresh-cut pine and old dust. The major crime squad was called in, moving through the room with the precision of surgeons. They didn't just find the earring. They found the blue contact lens, stuck to the floorboards like a tiny, accusing eye looking up at them. "This is it," Kelly whispered, the air in the room feeling heavy with the memory of violence. "This is where she died." The carpenter told them that only 2 people had keys to that specific apartment. One was the owner, Frank, who was out of town with a solid alibi. The other was the maintenance man, a man named Brian. Chapter 4. The Maintenance Man and the First Lie. Brian Tuttle was a ghost in the machinery of East Hampton. He was a local man from a well-known family, but he carried a darkness that he kept carefully tucked behind a facade of niceness. He was the man who fixed the leaks, the man who held the keys, the man who was always just there. When Kelly first brought him in for questioning, the first thing he noticed wasn't the man's demeanor, but the mark on his face. A long, red jagged scratch running from Tuttle's eyebrow down across the bridge of his nose. It was fresh, the edges still angry. "Work accident," Tuttle said, his voice flat, devoid of the tremor that usually accompanies a lie. "Caught myself on a piece of framing." But Kelly didn't see a work accident. He saw the desperate, final struggle of a woman who knew she was dying. He saw Trudy's fingernails. Tuttle was nervous, his hands shaking, as he lit a cigarette. He denied even knowing Trudy had never talked to her, he claimed, blowing a cloud of smoke toward the ceiling. "Don't know who she is. I stayed to myself." It was a lie. In a small town like East Hampton, that kind of lie was a neon sign. Witnesses quickly came forward, remembering seeing Tuttle talking to Trudy near the very apartment where she died. Trudy was looking for a new place, a sanctuary from the peeping Tom, and Tuttle had used that innocent desire for a fresh start to lure her into the shadows. Kelly watched Tuttle smoke. He watched the man stub out the cigarette butts in the glass ashtray with a strange, methodical intensity. In 1998, DNA was a burgeoning science, a miracle that was still out of reach for many small-town departments. But Kelly was a man of foresight. He knew that science was a river that only flowed forward. He waited until Tuttle left, then he carefully bagged the cigarette butts. "I'll wait," Kelly thought, looking at the evidence bags. "However long it takes, Brian, I'm not going anywhere." Chapter 5. The Blue Volvo and the 15-Year Shadow. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was mounting like a rising tide. Tuttle's girlfriend, Denise, finally broke. She told a story of a man spiraling out of control, a man fueled by jealousy and old demons. "He's back on the drugs," she told Kelly, her voice full of fear. "He thought I was cheating. He went crazy that Sunday night. He took my car and didn't come back until morning." "What kind of car?" Denise, Kelly asked, leaning in. "A Volvo." It matched a witness description of the car seen idling on the bridge at Ennial Falls in the pre-dawn light. Then, Tuttle's cousin, Jeremy Hartley, called. Tuttle had asked him to hide the car in a remote yard, to keep it away from prying eyes. Hartley, sensing the weight of a secret he couldn't carry, brought the car straight to the police. Inside the car, the technicians found a fluid stain on the back seat. The lab confirmed it was Trudy's. But the law is a cold mistress. They couldn't prove Tuttle was the one who put it there. There was no way to amplify the DNA to a level that would hold up in front of a jury. The prosecutor shook his head, the weight of the decision etched on his face. "It's not enough, Kelly. We get one shot at this. If we lose now, he walks forever. We have to wait for the science to catch up." So, the case went cold. Weeks turned into months, months into years. Kelly stayed in East Hampton. He saw Trudy's daughters, Kelly and her sister, in the grocery store. He saw the question in their eyes every time they passed a silent accusation. a plea for justice that he couldn't yet fulfill. He felt the weight of the town's judgment. They thought the small-town cops had botched the big one. They thought the murderer had won. But every year, on the anniversary of the discovery at Danielle Falls, Kelly would call the state crime lab. Is the technology there yet? Can we test the butts? Can we test the car seat? He kept the case file on his desk, the edges fraying. The photos of Trudy's kind face a constant companion. He became the guardian of her memory, the only man who still believed the shadow could be caught. Chapter 6. The Ghost of 2013. DNA was no longer a miracle. It was a standard, a language the courts finally understood. In 2013, the phone rang. It was the call Kelly had been waiting for through 2 decades of silence. Sergeant Kelly, this is the state lab. We have a match. The DNA from the semen in the Volvo matches. The saliva on the cigarette butts you submitted in 1998. The numbers are astronomical. Garrett, it's him. It's Brian Tuttle. Tuttle was found in South Carolina, living a quiet, broken life. He wasn't the predator, Kelly remembered. He was morbidly obese, confined to a wheelchair, hooked up to an oxygen tank that hissed with every breath. He was a man being consumed by his own body. Karma, the town whispered when the news broke. When Kelly finally stood across from him in the interrogation room, Tuttle didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The science spoke for him. The blue lens, the gold earring, the boxy volt, and the microscopic strands of DNA had formed a net that had finally, inevitably, tightened. Epilogue, the hug that remained. In 2016, Brian Tuttle pleaded guilty to the murder of Gertrude Ochak. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his numbered days in a 6x9 concrete cell, small, gray world for a man who had taken the life from so many others. Sergeant Kelly stood at Danielle Falls one last time after the sentencing. The air was crisp, the scent of wood smoke drifting from a nearby chimney. The water still rushed over the stones, a perpetual motion that seemed to wash away the stains of the past. The trees were still vibrant, their colors a testament to the cycle of life. The shadow was gone. She was the woman who gave the hugs that made the world feel safe. And as Kelly turned to walk back to his car, he felt a strange warmth, like a gentle hand on his shoulder. The hugs she gave weren't forgotten. They lived on in the daughters who finally found peace, in the detective who never stopped believing, and in the quiet streets of East Hampton, where people could finally sleep without wondering who was watching from the window. Justice, like the water at Danielle Falls, had finally found its way home. The Echoes of Danielle Falls. A novel of Bell. Prologue. The Last Hug. In the small town of East Hampton, Connecticut, known to locals as Belltown for its history of brass and Sheemster air, in November usually carried the scent of wood smoke and damp oak leaves. It was a place where the rhythm of life was measured by the tolling of the foundry, bells, and the predictable patterns of the seasons. Everyone knew your name, your mother's maiden name, and exactly which pew you sat in on Sunday morning. It was a sanctuary of familiarity, or so they thought. She was a woman built of soft edges and a heart that seemed too large for her chest. As a home health aide, she spent her days tending to the Faganda, elderly whose children had moved to the city, the sick who needed a hand to hold while the shadows grew long. Trudy believed in love, not the cinematic, explosive kind, but the quiet, enduring love of a shared cup of tea or a dog's loyal bark. She was looking for a fresh start, a new apartment where she could feel safe. She didn't know that the shadows were already closing in, weaving through the familiar streets she called home. She didn't know that, on a cold Monday in 1998, the bells of East Hampton would toll for her in a way the town would never forget. Chapter 1. The Caregiver's Mourning. The sun had not yet crested the horizon when Trudy's alarm clock chirped. It was Sunday, November 11th. Her small apartment was quiet, save for the rhythmic breathing of her little dog, a feisty companion who went everywhere with her. The dog, a terrier mix named Barney, nudged her hand with a cold nose, demanding the day begin. Trudy stretched, her joints complaining slightly from the years of lifting patience and standing on her feet. She looked at the framed photo on her nightstand. They were her pride, her North Stars. Everything she did, every shift she worked, was rooted in the hope that they would always feel the warmth she tried to provide for the world. To her, love was a physical thing, something you could wrap around someone like a handmade quilt. "Come on, little one," she whispered to the dog. "We have laundry to do, and then we'll see about that new apartment." She had been feeling uneasy lately. It was a prickle at the back of her neck when she pulled the curtains. There had been a menorah the shadow of one outside her window. A peeping Tom. The neighbors whispered in hushed tones over picket fences. She had mentioned it to her friend Ray Brown, a man she had gone on a few dates with. Ray was kind, a good man by all accounts, but the spark Trudy had once known with her ex-boyfriend, Harold, wasn't there. She saw Ray as a friend, a steady harbor, but her heart still yearned for something she couldn't quite. A passion that had perhaps died out with the foundry fires of the old town. She loaded the machines, the rhythmic sloshing of the water, providing a meditative backdrop to her thoughts. The laundromat was empty, except for the fluorescent hum and the smell of bleach. She was thinking about the apartment Brian Tuttle had mentioned. Brian was the maintenance man for the building, a local guy from a known family, always around, always helpful in that quiet, slightly off-putting way that people in small towns often overlook. He had told her about a vacancy on the 3rd floor. It was perfect. It was close. It was a chance to leave the shadows of her current window behind and start over where the locks were stronger and the view was higher. She didn't notice the blue-green Volvo idling at the edge of the lot, its headlights extinguished like a predator's eyes in the dark. She didn't see the glossy, bloodshot eyes watching her from across the street, fueled by a mixture of rejection and a brewing, toxic rage. Chapter 2. The Silence of the Stream. Sergeant Kelly was a man of tradition. On his days off, the badge stayed in the drawer, but the detective never truly turned off. It was Monday, November